I'm the old man of the Adirondacks, and this is Campfire Tales. Today I'm going to share with you an original story written by me and my editor. It's called The Legend of the Green Hatchet Man. Now, first, before I start telling this tale, this story, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I knew as a boy, what the Green Hatchet Man was. To me, he was always portrayed as a scary ghost. A ghost used to keep young campers like myself in their tents or in their sleeping bags and not out causing mischief. And that worked for me. The Green Hatchet Man was a glowy green figure with green eyes and kind of a green glowy silhouette. And it was always the green eyes that scared me, because counselors would take two flashlights and hold them side by side and shine them close to our tents. And our tents had green rain flies. They were green Eureka tents. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them. But those two lights, those 2 points of light shining from the darkness into my tent, I always thought for sure it was the Green Hatchet Man. In reality, it was, of course, my counselors trying to scare me and my other campers. And by and large, I think as campers, young campers, we were scared of the Green Hatchet Man. The Green Hatchet Man lived on Skull Island across the lake from Deerfoot Lodge. It's one of the two islands on Whitaker Lake. And he often hung a green lantern from a tree on this island or maybe somewhere else in camp. So whenever a green lantern was seen, we would know that the Green Hatchet Man was about. He always killed with his hatchet. And I guess not much more is known about him by me. Nowadays, the tales that counselors tell the campers are not as scary. There's a lot more humor. I know that the hero of the modern day tale is generally a counselor with shaking knees, scared to death, but defending his campers with a wet noodle. And that was what would defeat the Green Hatchet Man. Simply a wet noodle. I don't know that we're going to get that extreme with the legend of the Green Hatchet Man. Today we're just going to introduce you to the man who would become known as the Green Hatchet Man and some reasons why. By and large, I really enjoyed writing this story. The creativity that we were able to use whilst writing the story, the giggles, the laughs, the shenanigans that we were up to while brainstorming about who this character was going to be. And now I will share this story with you. It's just a short piece, just an introduction, and I hope that many more will follow. Many more segments of this story of the Green Hatchet Man. So here we go. Once, in an older time, when the world was sepia-toned and the cars were all black, there was a man named Thomas C. Foolery. Now, tomfoolery was something of what today we'd call a free spirit, but back in his day was known as more of a darned fool of a man. He roamed the wilderness in the Kunjamuck area. That was his favorite place, in search of riches in search of food, hunter-gatherer, trapper. That was some of who tomfoolery was. But during his roaming in the Kunjamuk area, on rainy nights he would be seen sleeping in the Kunjamuk cave. On clear nights, he'd sleep under the stars. He had a long beard that was just a tinge green, and when it grew past his belly button, he'd trim it with his trusty green hatchet. That hatchet was what separates Tom from other wandering spirits of this land. It was shiny and bright, and he'd wave it proudly whenever he saw another. No one quite knew how tomfoolery had come across such a fine tool, but it hadn't left his side as long as the town had known him. Strangely enough, it was still as bright and shiny as the day he got it. Tomfoolery didn't look like one who'd take care of his things, especially considering the patches on his trousers. But the hatchet's blade shone with a clear kind of light that could come only from loving attention. There was another, darker side of tomfoolery that set him apart, and that was a shadow that seemed to follow him everywhere. There was speculation about what it was and why it was there, but no one really knew. They just knew that where Tom went, shenanigans followed, even if Mr. Foolery was not involved. The town named this shadow the Daunchy, but it probably isn't anything we need to worry about. Tom was known as a bit of a prankster, known around town for his fun-loving practical jokes. He really loved annoying those no-good Flatlanders. Now, those are his words, not mine. I love you, Flatlanders. But he loved annoying them because they would be up here in the summer and cause no end of trouble. None of the locals were immune to these practical jokes either. There was the time he released all of Old MacDonald's goats into Mrs. Prim's flower garden. Why, you'd never imagine a woman so prim, a woman so proper, could swear like that. But that's a story for another time. Then, there's the time he found a way to turn Cherry Beach green. I'd tell that story today, but I'm not really sure how he did it. And who could forget Tom's 4th of July debacle? Mayor Roundbottom sure wouldn't. Not when all of the kegs of ale ended up somehow not being kegs of ale at all, but rather rabbits. The kegs were absolutely full of rabbits. And boy, they couldn't add or subtract, but man, could they multiply. Man, could they multiply. Full of juice, the original kegs did turn up later, about 2 miles down the Sacandaga River, at what is now Bob Peck's house. Some say they're still aging in the Peck's root cellar. But alas, this too is a tale for another time. There was one story here, and that's the story we're here for. This is the story about a joke. But this one wasn't like all the others. This practical joke would go down in the history books as the worst in recorded history for the Southern Adirondacks. Now, this is a quick side note to our readers and listeners. There's a few facts that you need to know. Number one, a group of crows is called a murder. A group of narwhals is called a blessing. Number 3, a group of skunks is called a surfeit. only one of these facts will be relevant. Now back to the story. It was fairly well known by the local folks that tomfoolery, or the Green Hatchet man, was something of a skunk whisperer. He had a way with these stinky varmints, so much so that he was often seen with a surfeit of them following him as he wandered near the Conjamuck River. Now, on Labor Day in 1953, that Mr. Foolery had a special treat for all of the tourists in town. Unfortunately, it was for all the locals too. But this was Tom's sort of way of going about giving a present to those Flatlanders who would be leaving town soon. On this fateful Labor Day weekend, an abandoned, horse-drawn covered wagon was found sitting in the center of Newton's Corners and the nucleus of Speculator, a place where everyone in town was gathering together for the annual Labor Day picnic. Upon inspection, there was a contraption inside this wagon, the likes of which no one had ever seen. There were gears visible slowly spinning, attached to some kind of large propeller on top of the wagon. Mystified, people were warned to stay away from that covered wagon. At precisely 12 noon, a peculiar thing started to happen. And I'd love to tell you what it was, but that will have to wait until next week. So I got you. I hope I got you. A little bit of a cliffhanger there. Tomfoolery, aka the Green Hatchet man, is up to no good, pulling a prank for the Flatlanders that had spent their summer in the Adirondack Park. A nice way to send them on their travels home. I hope you enjoyed this tale. It wasn't much, and we intend to get into it quite a bit more. I hope you follow along with us as we develop this character, this Green Hatchet man, as we develop his stories, his shenanigans, his tomfoolery.